Yeah,
having the flu does not necessarily mean puking.
See, I always thought that it did.
Yeah, like so did I.
Yeah, but yeah.
But yeah, when you get older and you're just like, why aren't I throwing up? I feel like crap.
Right.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, nobody's going to give me like ice chips with Gatorade in the toy for like not puking. Like that's going to get you nothing.
Yeah, I forgot about the benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, the benefits of childhood.
I feel like death, but I got a black and white TV rolled into my room.
Yeah.
Kids today, they don't know how good they got it.
No, they don't.
Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I, we're going to get together on the old Zuma studio and talk about a different horror film in the horror genre. This is a regular film in the horror genre. From your well-known classics down to that rare gem answering a babysitting ad on the back of your video store shelf. I forgot I was going to try and incorporate the movie, and I had nothing for that one.
A lot of personification there, but yeah, you're pulling it off, though.
This week, Tim and I are going to talk about the 2009 80s homage, The House of the Devil. Tim, I was going to ask you, did you ever do any babysitting? But I'm guessing the answer is no. So I'm going to go with, have any interesting babysitting stories or situations you were ever in? Or you did do babysitting.
I did do some babysitting. And I remember there was this kid, Justin, who I used to babysit for. And actually his mother used to babysit for me. And then he was born. And then I was like just old enough to babysit for someone else. So it was kind of an interesting like chain of ties coming down to me babysitting my babysitter's child.
Sure.
So, and the one thing is like, he just, of course, like any kid, like all he wanted to play with in my room were the things that I absolutely did not want him to play with, like my guitar or like any of the various weapons that I have. But he was like insistent on like using a knife to like, I had a toy and I said it was broken and he's like, well, I'm going to fix it. And he grabbed a knife. And then, I mean, it wasn't 5 seconds that knife was in his hand, that there wasn't just pure red blood pouring down his hand. God. The poor little kid. I mean, he must have been like 6 years old, just sliced his hand open. Then he was tough about it. He was great. I mean, like I took him to the bathroom. I was terrified because like, I think it was the first time that I babysat for him. And sliced open his hand.
Babysit him again after this.
Yeah. Somehow she must have been really desperate for resources there. But I did get a couple other chances after that. And to have a first babysitting job end in like I vividly remember like blood running down, like streaming down his hand.
Sure.
And but yeah, it didn't get any worse after that. But
That's good.
Very
bar very high.
Yes, yeah. Very sweet kid. Unfortunately, was killed in an automobile accident when he was about, I think 7. It was just
my God.
After that. Yeah, it was one of those tragic situations where someone is sort of waving somebody on. You remember where the Burger King was on 30?
Yeah.
In Maryville?
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of those situations where somebody is sort of waving somebody through, but another car is coming up on the shoulder And yeah, it was broadsided and killed, and yeah, buried in his Cub Scout uniform. It was just, it was tragic. It was tragic. Yeah, I don't mean to take this in such a like a awfully like sad way, but he was a very, very sweet kid, and I remember him very fondly. And yeah, I'm glad that I got to spend the time with him that I did.
Yeah, sorry for your loss. That's
well,
awful.
now I promise, like you had no idea. You thought like, I'll just ask him about babysitting. It'll be
I was
fine.
waiting for like, I had a hot babysitter. I tried hitting on her a lot.
Those two.
Oh man, I had at least two. They were sisters.
Oh yes.
One was the top gymnast in the state, and then the next one was one of the top divers in the state. That did a lot for 10-year-old Andy for sure.
Right. And they were sisters, and they would babysit you at the same time?
No. So once the gymnast went away, the diver took over.
Yeah.
And then what's crazy is the gymnast's daughter ended up babysitting my youngest daughter. So it was a nice little group.
Yeah, it's just, I guess that's just a thing then. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember that babysitter of mine, Justin's mom. I remember she was painting a mural on my my bedroom wall because she was also an artist.
Geez.
So while she was babysitting for me, she was painting a mural of like Jupiter and like a satellite like on my wall, and it was freaking awesome. And I remember asking her where babies come from, because I think maybe at that time she might have been just pregnant with Justin, maybe, but I was asking her, and she had like the sweetest way of describing it. She's like, when a man and a woman fall in love and they get very close, this magical thing can happen. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. It was very sweet.
Yeah. Well, that's those are some good babysitting times. So you never were involved in a satanic ritual, though, I'm assuming.
No. For as much of that was apparently going on all around us at the time.
Right.
That it never worked its way into my home.
Well, it sure happened here in the House of the Devil, Tim. It's the movie we're talking about this week. This is from 2009. It's never seen this. I can't remember the time I've ever seen this credit. You often see written and directed, but written, directed, and edited.
Yeah.
By Ty West. Very weird to cram the editing in there. Almost you would think that would be a separate thing, but to lump it all in like one credit. Maybe you have to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's just.
I've seen it where someone gets a separate writing credit and and it like written by Wes Craven, directed by Wes Craven.
Yeah, I guess I've seen directed and edited by before, I think. But you're right, to have all three in there basically just says to you right off the bat, this is Ty West's baby. Like he basically has completely made this thing from scratch himself. So no, that was awesome. And
I think it shows, and not in a bad way. Like there's definitely, this is a movie that doesn't feel interfered with. It feels like it has a vision.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that, and Ty West is a big part of that whole like new group of independent horror films coming out with A24 and this group, which I think his group is called Glass Eye, I think. But there is this like new young just clan of people, not necessarily all working together for the same companies, but sort of they're kind of feeding off of each other's momentum. And it's something that is definitely bringing, like, I don't want to say a higher level to modern horror, but some people might say that with movies like Hereditary and such, that there's sort of an elevated
prestige horror now is making a big move.
Right. And while it's not necessarily, that's not my favorite genre of horror films, at the same time, I appreciate that there is some super legit artistry going into these. And with this one, this is the most amazing fact about this movie. We all know, the whole world at this point knows Stranger Things. And you have to consider that The House of the Devil came out 7 years before Stranger Things was ever in front of anybody in their living room. And that's amazing. And Stranger Things got all of the credit in the world and deserved.
Well, and let's point out the reason you're bringing this up is House of the Devil, while filmed in 2009, is set in 82, I think.
It's 83.
83. Okay. And he does a very good job at recreating, and it's not like a Stranger Things where it's like, remember this, remember this, remember this. It's just like there's one part, not to jump into anything real quick, just where she's using a rotary phone, but the way the cord is like all snarled up, like it's been used 1,000 times. I was like, wow, that is a good detail. Like, without her being like, I'm sorry, the cord's all messed up, like it's just like, it felt so authentic. The hair is very authentic. He shot this on 16 millimeter. There's like no tracking shots. It's all zooms. The opening credits are like so 80s, where it's just that this 80s jam, and then like the bold yellow font and freeze framing when different credits come up. Like Nancy thought she was just watched the beginning, and when I told her what year it was made, she was like, "Wait, what?" Like, yeah, it just looks like the 80s. Well, it looks like an 80s film.
Yeah, and I actually saw, and I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Stranger Things, but I actually saw a comment in it was like maybe for the opening credits on YouTube for House of the Devil, and somebody commented, there is more 1980s authenticity in the opening credits for House of the Devil than 3 seasons of Stranger Things. And I think that what you're getting at is absolutely right. Stranger Things does a little bit more of that wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, it's definitely more of an homage. Whereas this movie, and I'm going to make this claim pretty confidently, that I think that if you had somebody who did not recognize any of the actors in this film, I think you might actually be able to convince somebody that this movie was made in 1983. Totally. I absolutely believe he could. It's that well done. And I can't wait to talk all about that stuff, because you know how much I love the 80s.
Yes.
But do you want to hit us up with Nan Sum real quick?
Let's hit up Nan Sum. So, okay. Student Samantha wants to move out of her dorm and into her own place. Needing the first month's rent, she answers a babysitting notice that she finds on her campus. When she arrives, she's told that she will not be looking after a child, but an old woman. As the night goes on, Samantha learns that the bumps and shuffling she hears throughout the house are not only something she should be worried about, but will become something that will, in quotes, alter her life forever. And that's a House of the Devil.
Yeah, you can say that. No, it's so great. What we're talking about. You just reminded me of it when you mentioned her finding that notice on campus. If I were to say that I wanted to make a movie that was set in 1983 and have the only setting for the movie, like the whole thing take place inside of like a motel room. Now, I'm not saying that wouldn't be hard to get all of, the carpet right and the wall hangings right and everything like that. But that's just confined to one space. This movie actually has wide shots on a campus, on a supposed college campus, inside some buildings, in some dorm rooms, with her walking around outside in those great opening credits. And there is not one thing, and trust me when I say I was searching for it. Not in a like shitty way, but I wanted to find that one thing that was going to trip up and sort of belie this whole 1983 thing going on. And but there's never one thing. The only thing that you could maybe make an argument for is that I think I think Samantha's wearing a Swatch watch, which would have come out like maybe 3 years after like 86.
Dude, I was looking for stuff too. Like I was looking up like, how much did a payphone cost? Was it a quarter? And it was a quarter. It went up 20. It went up 5 cents from 20 in 1980.
Wow. Yeah. But no, even with the like just vigilant searching frame by frame. I mean, they did such an amazing job. And usually, what's funny, when in these movies or any movie, when they're trying to recreate not necessarily a period piece from 100 or hundreds of years ago, but when it's like just from a handful of decades ago, usually the thing that really trips them up is language. Like they'll use words or phrases that weren't popular at that time. But even that, they really were very specific to the time period. As I was watching it,
there was one, it's funny you say that because and I can't remember what she said. There was something Greta Gerwig said where I was like, that feels like it could pass, but it's something that's used more prevalently today. And I can't remember. It's something they said in the pizza parlor.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because while I think that Greta Gerwig does a great job in this movie, there was something about her performance that read a little bit more modern to me than the character of Samantha, her friend, the final girl, the main character. But not so much so that it took you out of anything.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Greta Gerwig, better director than actor.
Probably that might be fair.
Yeah, let's get into this cast for a second.
Yes,
it's kind of a cool cast. So first you got Samantha, that she's played by Jocelyn Donahue, which I don't want to be creepy, but I was absolutely smitten with. I just thought she was beautiful. And there was a point I was watching this with my daughter and I'm like, do you think she's pretty? And she's like, yeah, she is. I'm like, yeah, I think so too. Like, in fact, it's like, I'm like, there's not a lot going on in this movie, but I don't mind because I just get to kind of watch her. And she's like, that's creepy. Like, well, I didn't mean for it to be creepy.
But just real quick though, you're right. It is impossible. And of course, we're going to talk even more about those opening credits because they're so freaking fantastic. But it's impossible not to fall her immediately when she's just walking around and we're getting these super cool freeze frames. And this is the coolest thing about her, real quick, is that, and this is going to sound like a really dumb thing to say, but she looks like an 80s person, not just with the feathered hair, but there's something about her face, even like maybe it's because
the way the clothes actually fit. Cause you can get someone like a pair of 80s jeans, but it doesn't look it. There's just something about the way her clothes even fit her.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe she definitely kind of harkens back to like a Margot Kidder. I think she's probably a little prettier, but I mean, who am I to, throw Margot Kidder on the bus?
It's a fine line.
No, it's
Margot Kidder is gorgeous.
She is easy to fall in love with in this movie because she's adorable and she's beautiful and even beyond all of that, fantastic acting job, by the way. I mean, let's not forget to throw that in there. Really just fucking kills it.
Yeah, she is so good in this movie. And she did win an award. She won like a Screamy or I don't know, some kind of horror award for acting, but I'd say well reserved. The Screamfest Horror Film Festival. She won Best Actress. But
the most prestigious of all acting awards.
Right, I'm sure they call it the Screamy.
Something like that.
All right, yeah, but she's fantastic. Then we've got our main couple, played by Mary Woronov, who I was mainly a stage actress, but she is great in her very limited time in this movie. And then Tom Noonan is Mr. Ullman. They're Mr. and Mrs. Ullman. And Tom Noonan is just one of those classic character actors. You'll see him and go, oh, I know that guy. How do I know that guy? I know him from Synecdoche, New York. You know him from X-Files, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic.
What was his X-Files episode?
It's called Paper Hearts.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's he plays a serial killer and a child serial killer. And he is, like I've said, he is fantastic because he's this juxtaposition of different traits all wrapped up in the same guy. Like he's super tall, but he's kind of frail. And he's got these really kind eyes, but he's also got sort of a nervous disposition, which is kind of suspicious. So talk about the absolutely most perfect guy. He kind of like does a genuine job at doing what Jeff Goldblum always tries to do. like that sort of like nervous, like my thoughts are preoccupied with something else.
Right.
Like Tom Noonan is doing that. Jeff Goldblum is just sort of spazzing out.
That's a good comparison.
And you
Excuse me.
know, that actress as well, who you mentioned. What's her Mary?
Voronov.
Yeah. Well, some people now. This is kind of more obscure. Was in the music video for Suicidal Tendencies' most famous song, "Institutionalized." But where you would know her from is Chopping Mall and Eating Raoul. She's the other one of that couple.
She's the little sassy
she-
lady at the beginning.
Yes, and
Oh my God.
she was actually one of Andy Warhol's like it girls, like where he was trying to make these like instant celebrities by just picking like interesting people on like the punk scene and in the 70s in New York. She was one of those people. So she was in some like Andy Warhol movies. And then
how did that not come up when I looked her up? That's crazy.
Yeah, but that's her.
And I knew stage stuff.
I knew it just because her last name seemed sort of like there was something about it. I'm like, God, I know that we've done something to cover this person before. That name was so familiar. And then I saw Chopping Mall and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then, of course, we've already mentioned her, Greta Gerwig, who is fine in this and would go on to be nominated for 3 Academy Awards and win one, I believe. So, I mean, good for her.
Now, what is now? I'm gonna admit some ignorance here. I don't know much about her. I'm given to understand that she is, as someone told me, like pretty much at the forefront of feminist cinema.
Yeah, I'm gonna say her most recent stuff probably not in your wheelhouse of things I've checked out. She wrote and directed Lady Bird with Saoirse Ronan and Laurie Metcalf. That was a really big movie a couple years ago that got nominated for Best Picture.
I've heard.
Got nominated for Best Director. And then she last year or 2 years ago, it's hard to tell when movies came out. the last movie that came out. But I think it was 2019. She adapted Little Women. I feel like she directed that one too, but I'm not sure. But I think she won the Oscar for the adaptation of Little Women.
That's
another little. Every 10 years, we got to have a Little Women that everyone loves.
I am aware of Little Women. I am given to understand that it is influential, and someday I will check out one of the 10 incarnations of it somewhere along the line. I'm sure. But
I can't tell you I've ever.
But she's not that old, is she? And she's already getting nominated for directing.
She was born in '83. She was born the year this movie is set.
Okay.
Crazy. So yeah, she's late 30s.
And then rounding out the cast, because there are a few other people in it. There aren't many people in it. But did you recognize Dee Wallace?
Oh, yes, of course. The mother. Yeah, she's the very brief part right at the beginning. She's showing Sam the house that she wants to rent or apartment or whatever. And yeah, Dee Wallace, the mom from E.T.
Oh, yeah. Well, Anne Cujo.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, a nice like. And I'm sure at that point it's probably intentional. Like you're basically writing a sort of love letter to the 80s. And we've talked about it being 83. I think that's the year that you have to go with because it does prominently feature the Fix song, One Thing Leads to Another, and that came out in 83. So everything before it, I thought it might have looked a little bit more 81, 82-ish, but it's definitely just an overall love letter to the early 80s or late 70s for that.
Yeah. This movie's budget was under $1 million. It was 900,000. How much do you think they spent on royalties for that Fix song? I was like, most of it was a big chunk of their budget.
Yeah, most of it. And, they did get away though with not having to budget for moving in stereo, even though that's basically the opening song. That song by the Cars, that dun, 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 dun. It's from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Stranger Things uses it. That's basically what that intro song is it's not moving in stereo, but it's like a slowed down, like pared down version of it.
Okay.
If you go back and listen to it, you'll hear that's the theme that they were playing with, which is perfect for this time period. But yeah, that sadly though, you just mentioning budgets, 900,000, not a big budget. You'd hope to make all of that back. Sadly, They made
Yeah.
100,000.
This is the other homage to the 80s, straight to video with this one.
Right. Yeah,
It's just surprising. It's a good movie. It was received very well. I feel like some of that has to do with Ty West, and I wonder how he's viewed in the community, because he's obviously very passionate about his work. Because before this movie, he did Cabin Fever 2, which was a total mess. He wanted his name pulled off of it. He was like, make it an Alan Smithy film.
Yeah.
But then I read they couldn't do that because he wasn't a part of the guild, the Directors Guild, and they will only do that. Or if anyone doesn't know, Alan Smithy is like when a director feels like a project has been taken away or they don't want to put their name on it, they can petition the Directors Guild to have the name changed as this base Alan Smithy name, which is also just kind of a protest name. Like, this is when you see directed by Alan Smithy, the person who directed it is not happy with the movie.
Right.
Which I kind of went on a Alan Smithy dive after this.
There's some big movies that have been Alan Smithy movies.
Oh yeah. But then because I remembered this one movie that had come out called Burn Hollywood Burn. It was called an Alan Smithy film, Burn Hollywood Burn. And that movie is so bad. The actual director of that movie wanted to get it directed by Alan Smithy, which he did. And then the Directors Guild was like, this has gotten out of hand. We're retiring the Alan Smithy thing. So you can't even do that anymore.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But yeah, Joe Esterhaus wrote it. And I remember at the time it just because he was real big. It was right after Basic Instinct and Showgirls. He was just kind of like the hot screenwriter of the moment. And then he wrote this fuck you Hollywood movie. And they were like, this is the worst garbage ever. And not even like it's just awful. No one in that had anything to do with that movie has ever said anything good about that movie.
Well, I do think though that, and I don't know a ton about Ty West, but I think that he's pretty well regarded. Like, I know that he kind of continued down the same path of doing his independent horror movies. Like, he did a movie.
He
called
hasn't done
Next.
a movie in a long time.
No,
Sorry.
yeah, I think he kind of switched over to some TV.
Mm-hmm.
But he did the notable things for me is that he did a great horror movie, kind of like it's also a bit of a slow burn, which is what he's famous for, but a movie called You're Next, which is really great. And then he also directed a segment in the ABCs of Murder, which is an anthology film where for every letter of the alphabet, there are these short, horrific little segments that have to do with like his is M is for miscarriage. So that's his segment. It is a fucking hardcore movie. Like, some of those segments are beyond disturbing, but it's really great. It's super great. So the he's continued to stay busy, but it seems a little slowed down. But
he was not, I had not heard of this movie until you brought it up. And I've just never heard his name before.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing to kind of hold himself back, but it kind of seems like he knows the right people in the industry and he's worked with the right people to sort of branch out. I don't know. Maybe Cabin Fever 2 just soured him on the whole.
Maybe he's happy with just making art. Right. He's one of those weirdos that's not doing it for the money, who actually cares about his projects.
But it's crazy though, to think, as I was mentioning earlier, the Stranger Things phenomena. Was it too 80s? Because there's a difference between like we're talking about showcasing 80s things, and actually making. Because even Donnie Darko is set in 1988, which is kind of like a tough nondescript time to set a film in, but you don't get the impression that it's made in 1988. Right. This film, like I'm saying, more so than any film I've ever seen in my life, actually pulls it off. And it's such a miracle. And I know we were kind of going on and on about those opening credits, just to start with that, that intro, that sort of spoken word, kind of ominous intro. Probably the most famous one is at the beginning of Chainsaw, the original Chainsaw from.
Well, there's no narration. It's just text.
Yeah.
You might have read it to yourself in an ominous voice.
Yeah, I think that's what but it was just the idea of opening with a text, that.
And it's like in the 1980s, 70% of adults thought there were satanic cults and the other 30 thought it was a government cover up. Like, I'm sure there were some who were on the neither.
Right. Yeah. Undecided.
Yeah.
But no, it's, I mean, that's kind of already hearkening back. And then we get the color, and you might not really think about this. Like when I saw it mentioned in research, you think like, what's the big deal? Like the actual text of the opening credits is in yellow, but it really does. Like as soon as you see like directed by, written by, all that stuff, and it's in yellow as opposed to white, it really does harken back to the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the 16 millimeter. Now let's talk about that for a second, because I'm sure it might drive some younger people crazy to see what 16 millimeter looks like. But for me, it's like this beautiful sense memory of that really soft focus. It's not blurry,
but it's grainy.
Yeah, it's kind of grainy, and it's just sort of just a little Vaseline on the lens, kind of like just that sort of softness. Yeah. And it's just, God, the hours of movies that I watched that look just like that. It was so awesome to see that again, and not have it be like, when Robert Rodriguez or Tarantino try to do that like grindhouse look, like they're really just, punching you straight in the teeth with it, with like, look at the like hair on the corner of the screen, like those little like hairs or little bits of like choppy film, getting messed up. They're sort of like forcing it down your throat. Whereas with this 16 millimeter, it just looked like they weren't trying to be cute. Like that's the best part of this movie, that they're not trying to be,
there were like,
it's not a gimmick.
No, I will say, because I was kind of waiting for it. There were just a couple moments, and I can't even think specifically. And it's like such a minute complaint detail. There were just a couple times where I'm like, oh, okay. Because like you're familiar with Tim and Eric, right? Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job. They do a lot of 80s style stuff. It's over the top and, obviously, but there's definitely an homage love there. There were just a couple beats in this movie where I was like, all right, that feels like a Tim and Eric, where they were like, okay, normally we would see that here, so let's do that here. Like there would be a weird zoom or something.
Yeah.
It felt a little forced, but it's only because I'm like so super like present about it and like, aware. Like if I just like relaxed, it just washes over you and it just feels very natural.
Well, yeah, and credit going to, all over the place, the hairstylist, the costumer, and really the set design was just out fucking standing. Like I remember those green sheer drapes that I used to have, or my family had in the late 70s, early 80s, where it's like, it's not like a thick drape. It was just what you'd have in front of like a picture window.
Yeah.
But there were these like sheer, very thin, like almost transparent. And they were green for whatever reason. And just like that in this movie. And it's got to be so difficult to reach such a level of authenticity and not go over the top with it. And I think the only scenes here where they let themselves have a little fun with it was there's a scene where Samantha's watching a news broadcast, and it's kind of it's a little cheesy, the newscaster is saying like, time for movies, like break out the popcorn. I like mine with
butter.
Yeah, right. Like that was like they let themselves have just a little fun, but they could, because newscasters are sort of cheesy in their own way.
Yeah,
or they certainly were back then. But yeah, as we dig into the heart of this thing, obviously we've mentioned it a couple of times that there's a slow burn here. So
very slow.
Whereas you might feel like, okay, so if this is an homage to late 70s, early 80s horror, like it's going to be like a full-on slasher with a high body count and all that sort of thing. But no, like you should just put that out of your head before you even start to watch this, or you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
But the build is amazing. Now, later on, I'm going to ask you the burning question, which is, does this movie's finale match its build? Which I think is an important question.
Yes.
But the build is fantastic because, like you said, in Nansum, it's a simple story. And I love stories like this, plot lines like this that start so simply that it could happen to anyone. And it's that this girl has this apartment that she absolutely loves. Really doesn't like her dorm life. She can't stand her roommate, and who's always got her boyfriend over. And she just
was the question I was going to ask you. Ever had a messy roommate?
Have I ever had a messy roommate?
Yeah.
I've been one.
Well, the joke being we were roommates in college,
Right.
and I'm very messy.
But I'm not gonna.
I know you wouldn't say it. That's why I didn't.
But we were messy together.
You
though,
also
I think,
bailed pretty quickly, so
Yeah,
we
I
were
did.
roommates for very long.
I probably would have noticed that it was messier had I been there. that would have helped it along.
Well, it got out of control after you left. I'll say that.
But no,
Sorry.
No, you're right. But that's okay. At least, I mean, you might have been messy, but you had to look over and see like a wall, like plastered with dead actors, like above my bed. So, it was even, evenly played out.
And at least you never had to come back to the room with a sock on the handle. You were like, sure, like Andy has no one in there. I am free to come and go whenever I want.
Although with the advent of computer porn, like at any given time, maybe there wasn't somebody in there with you, but you could have easily put the sock on the door at any given time.
Yeah, I did have our RA walk in on me one time while perusing a CD-ROM.
Yeah, it was
like,
that
not cool, dude.
That CD, I even remember, God, what was her name? It was like Savannah something or whatever. Remember that blonde? You remember who I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, what's that?
Savannah Saint?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah. But anyway, back to 80s homage movies. So here we are, and it starts out so simply. She just wants a place to live. We get that nice little scene with Dee Wallace. We get these fantastic opening credits. And then we're just sort of introduced to her taking this job, which it's kind of eerie from the get-go because she's and it's another really great example of how much we're just immersed in our own technology now. When she calls about the babysitting job, she calls from a payphone, like you mentioned. And then when she starts walking away, the phone rings and she goes back and picks it up and says hello. And, the guy says that he's calling back about the babysitting job. And she said, how did you get this number? Yeah. And in your mind, you're thinking like, well, caller ID.
Yeah.
Well, there is no caller ID.
This is even before Star 69.
Right.
Was a thing.
Yeah. And so, long story short, she has this talk with this friend of hers, Megan, played by Greta Gerwig. And, her friend isn't really supportive of the idea. She thinks it sounds a little creepy. There was sort of a big push at this time, as opposed to in society, as opposed to saying like, wow, men or perpetrators of violence shouldn't be doing that. It was more put across to people as, hey, ladies, watch out for yourself out there.
Yeah, don't put yourself in a situation.
Exactly.
It's still kind of a thing today. Like maybe the last couple years we've tried to change that, but yeah.
So her friend is trying to be that cautionary voice to say like, hey, I'm not sure you should do this. At least let me drive you out there. Now, this is one part of the movie that I wanted to ask you about, because what the movie very efficiently and very successfully does is to, and we'll get to why in a second, but it very much leaves Samantha alone in this scary, crazy ass situation that she's in, because the character of Megan is killed very quickly, very abruptly.
Yeah.
After dropping off Samantha at the house.
40 minutes into the film.
Right. Now, my question,
nothing has happened, which is, it's an effective kill because you are like, whoa.
Yeah. You're shocked.
Yeah.
But But let me just ask you this. Do you feel, and again, I'm watching a movie that I absolutely loved, and I'm just trying to find a problem with it. So that's where this comes from. It didn't bother me that much. But do you feel like this movie did you want to maybe have a little bit more time with Megan, or maybe another character where?
Yes. I thought Megan was going to hang out with her. When she left, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, why? Because then it is just a lot of Sam walking around that house by herself. Yeah. And she has to talk to herself, which is, a little, I guess it's fine for a movie. You don't really do it as much as you might think you talk to yourself. You don't audibly talk to yourself probably as much, especially as much as Sam does in this movie. So yeah, it was weird. And there was a lot of time that we could have spent, because slow burn aside, like even when she calls and, has the first conversation with Mr. Ullman, and he's like, I'll meet you in front of like the student center or whatever. And then he never shows up. And then he like calls again. And then they almost are like, okay, well, will you still be the babysitter? Like, I cut all that out. Like him not showing up, but then still doing the job, or, incorporate Greta Gerwig into it somehow,
Yeah.
People.
And I found myself like, even at the end, I'm like, is Dee Wallace as the landlady going to make a reappearance? Like, somebody save this girl. Like, there's like usually another character. There's like the nice, gardener or something like that. Usually there's some other bastion of hope out there that like maybe this, whether they come and save her or not. But she really was completely on her own. And you're right. There is an immense amount of time spent with Sam just going around the house by herself. Now, the one saving grace of that is, like I've said before, my apologies to women everywhere, but there is nothing more frightening on this planet than an old lady. That's just the truth. I mean, maybe that one old guy from Poltergeist 2, but an elderly woman, like a creepy elderly woman. I mean, just see anything, see The Shining, see it, I mean, anything. It's
but you don't see a creepy elderly woman until 15 minutes left in the movie.
But that's the beauty of it, is that when Sam arrives at the house and she's quickly told, this isn't really a babysitting job. You're going to be just looking after, making sure that our mother doesn't, hurt herself. She's upstairs. You probably won't even see her, but they're dropping all these weird hints about her, like that she's agile and active.
Yeah, she takes care of herself.
Yeah, all these like strange things about this mother. So what I'm getting at is this whole time that Samantha is walking around, you're never given the shots that you're usually given in a movie, where maybe you see the quote unquote mother character in like silhouette or something like that. Like, you never, ever see her. Mm-mm. So your mind is racing with like, what the fuck is up there? Like, is this the kind
something's
of, like,
up?
Is she like horribly disfigured? Is she one of those creepy old ladies that's like really like lightning, but old, or something? Like, your mind is just searching for what horror this mother character is. So that part is very effective. And it's great that the house is so amazing, because it gives you a lot to look at.
Yeah. I love that house. It's a gorgeous house. I realized something. I love a creaky house, like a house that makes a lot of noise. And I think the reason is then you're not put off by other noises. Like, if you were in a house that was very still and quiet and then started hearing stuff, way more unnerving than just a house that just always sounds like someone shuffling around in it, or like that makes a lot of noise when you walk.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it looks like a beautiful house, but it also does, look like a creepy house. And it is beautifully decorated. And I did try, me, I like to read into things. And there's an interesting painting that kind of zooms in on Four Horsemen. that I thought
yeah.
of a tie to the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Interesting. Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So there's that. And then I have a funny note here. It's just 2 words. It says a harpsichord.
Yeah.
Like there's a scene where, I mean, most people, I mean, not trying to like elevate myself like I'm some sort of, musical genius, but she's up on a set of stairs and you're looking down at what most people would think is like maybe a small piano, but I instantly recognize it as a harpsichord. And I'm like, oh, you don't get to see those very often in a movie.
Now, here's the thing about it, though, because we keep talking about how creepy this house is and how fitting it is for this family. It's not their house.
No.
So it's kind of weird. They just found a nice, creepy house that fits them so well. I want to jump back to when they first get there because there are a couple of things I want to talk about. So Greta Gerwig drives her out there. She wants to hang out. They meet first. Like, I love the introduction of Tom Noonan because it's the shot. You don't see his face at all. And I would assume the house is like one step up from the porch because really all you see is framed are these girls. And then you kind of just see his waist come into frame. So he's towering. He's already a tall dude.
Yeah. He's 6'5".
Then just one step up. Yeah. He's just towering above these girls. So that's a really cool effect. They come in and he like brings Sam into the kitchen and he's trying to explain to her like, look, I can only pay one of you. And she's like, oh, my friend's she just drove me out here. She's just going to hang out, Now, he never is like insistent that she leaves, which is weird because then she ends up leaving. Sam talks him up to $400 because he's like, look, I haven't been fully honest. We don't have a child. It's my wife's mother that you have to look at, but people are very off-put about watching old people as opposed to children, which I totally understand. And she's like, I don't really know that. She gets him to pay $400 and then like Greta Gerwig leaves. Like she has to leave. But I will say there is an odd moment where Greta is just sitting in like the living room area and they've got a bowl of hard candies. I didn't understand what the fuck was happening. The series of events, because she takes one out of the bowl, puts it in her mouth, makes a disgusted face, spits it into a napkin, then goes back to the bowl, fishes around. This all just seems to be a bunch of unwrapped hard candies, picks another one out, then like bites into it. I've never seen someone bite a hard candy in half just to eat it. And then she just takes a couple more and puts those in her purse. Like, I didn't understand.
I think if anything, it like, and I get what you're saying. Like it's kind of an odd scene. I don't know if they just had to give her a bit of business to do. Right. I mean, with us having been in shows before, we know that sometimes it's like you're just finding something for an actor to do. But I mean, it's a focused scene. I think if anything, the idea of being in this strange house with these strange people and ingesting some food that's there of theirs is kind of like weird and creepy in and of itself.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are some plot devices or some plot happenings that are very, very dependent on specific things happening.
Yeah.
So,
well, and speaking of, when Greta Gerwig leaves, she like drives like a quarter mile down the road. There's a cemetery right by the house, and she like pulls off into the cemetery to have a cigarette, which is not something someone would do.
No.
She wasn't like, I'm just going to go down the street and wait for you to be done. She's like under the assumption she will be called when she has to come, because she tries calling Megan several times.
Right.
So she stops there to have a cigarette, and then a guy shows up to light her cigarette. And I mean, thankfully she does have a line. She's like, were you just here waiting? Like, cause that's what I was saying. Like, what is that dude doing? And he's like, you're not the babysitter? She's like, no, I'm just the friend. And boom, just shoots her in the face. Like this one comes out of nowhere. It's great. Just obliterates her head, essentially, puts a huge cavity in it. And then he like gets in the car, and I love this where he's just like sees her cigarette and like, in Parliament lights, you'd reach over a dead body for one. Like just grabs her cigarette and smokes it.
It's true.
So yeah, that's like kind of weird. And in the end, unnecessary.
Right. And you're right. It's like the only thing that I
Like
could
her
think
death
of
is inconsequential. Like it never comes back. Like why does that guy kill her? Because we should say they're part of a satanic cult.
right.
This is something I didn't mention in the sum, which I had an issue with, was this eclipse. So there's an eclipse happening, a total lunar eclipse. And Tim, I'm going to tell you something. For whatever research Ty did on what the 80s were like, he did none. He did the opposite research on how a lunar eclipse works.
Right.
Or the frequency of a lunar eclipse.
And I even went back and looked at the collection of total eclipses in the 80s. And in 82, there was a total lunar eclipse, but in 83, which is where this movie is set, and they're talking about it being cold outside. Yeah. So it would have been only a partial lunar eclipse in 83.
Wait, why? No. You mean, are you talking about a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse?
A lunar eclipse.
No. Okay. Here's the thing about a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses happen so frequently that 30% of them in a year are total lunar eclipses. Really? Because the moon passing behind the earth that's not a huge thing. The moon lining up directly with the sun, that's a huge thing. Like literally, we will have our area alone in Northwest Indiana. Next year in May, we will have a total lunar eclipse. In 2022, we will have 2 total lunar eclipses.
Yeah, okay? It does seem like it's
something that happens where it's an event.
No, that's true. And you're right. Cause like even on like the whatever you call like cork board thing on campus where she finds the first ad for the babysitting job. There is all that stuff.
Everything else is about astronomy club and
the eclipse. And like, it's such a huge
also
deal.
On the news, they're like, this eclipse can be seen from every continent on this side of the globe except Antarctica. I'm like, there are 2 continents on this side of the globe, first off.
Right. Yeah. So maybe a little lax in his research detail there.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I don't feel like the eclipse was needed though.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's just like just for people that aren't super into astronomy. It sounds kind of creepy. Like it kind of amps up. Like if you don't know anything about eclipses,
it's another one of those things where the devil doesn't work unless the moon is in the earth's shadow. Like
right, yeah. I mean, the full moon thing with the werewolf, like that we all buy that. Like that's all fine. Yeah. But no, you're right. It seems like just an element to kind of like up the ante a little bit.
And also this family, so the Ullmans, what you find out throughout the course of the movie is they have like come into this house, killed the owners of the house, and are now using this as they're going to have a ceremony, and they use Sam as a conduit to essentially bring forth the Antichrist. Like that's right. Your main goal of our antagonists. But they seem so rushed and hurried, and it's like everything is just coming together by the skin of their teeth, because there's a lot of stuff going on with the Ullmans because they leave for some reason.
Right.
You don't know why. They're which is fine. Like it's fine if they have their own mysterious thing.
Yeah, maybe they've got some pre-ceremony fire,
right.
Like fire up thing.
But it's not like an eclipse is sprung on you. Like I said, like you could just you could figure out for the next million years when you are going to have an eclipse, right? Like that none of that is changing. They do have a little bit at the end of this movie where like astronomers are shocked at how quickly the moon left the eclipse. Like, all right, whatever. But like, again, how that relates to anything, I don't know or care. It shouldn't. If they took all the eclipse shit out of this, it would be the same movie.
That's true. Yeah. And I think maybe it was just a sort of, I think it was maybe just a creepy element thing that they were trying to throw in to like kind of set the stage for, this sort of excitement in the air of when something is happening in space.
Yeah, maybe it's actually like a metaphor for the actual satanic panic, like a thing that really wasn't a thing that people overreacted about.
Yeah,
Like it was something that was not very serious to begin with, but everyone kind of flipped the fuck out about it. It was all over the news. Maybe that was the eclipse for this.
Could
that was his commentary. That's how I'm going. Ty West, good job on your commentary.
But no, but there's a couple other plot things too. Like Mr. Ullman is insistent that Samantha call for a pizza. Like he's, basically saying like, look, you're going to be hungry. We're going to be gone for a while. And you had goddamn better order a pizza from this specific pizza place. Yeah. And the phone number is on their fridge.
He does it 3 times. The first time he's just like, I know you got college kids love pizza. He says it a second time and kind of stops himself. He's like, I'm sorry, I already mentioned the pizza. And then as he's like walking out the door, just says, and order pizza.
Right.
He's like sassing it as he shuts the door. Don't forget to order pizza.
Right. And it's like, that there's something by the third time, certainly by the third time, that there's something suspicious about that. And they do have a little bit of 80s fun here with the pizza place, because if you notice, when they answer the phone, they say pizza, yep. Which is harkening back to Little Caesars. And now, granted, this movie came out after 83, but the person taking the order on the other end of the line says, when they're asking what she wants on it, and they say extra anchovies, which could be hearkening back to the movie, the Patrick Dempsey movie Loverboy, where he plays like a gigolo, like a teenage gigolo, where the code, if you're like wanting the pizza and the dong, is to order it with extra anchovies. That's how that's got to be intentional. That's his code for knowing that, he's going to go hook up some bored housewife.
Interesting.
But yeah, so maybe a little bit of a wink.
And at the end, he says, we'll see you in 30 minutes, which was Domino's hook. Yes. 30 minutes or it's free.
Yes. And so that's happening now. Obviously, when we know something's up with this pizza, because she eats it, and it's not immediately, but pretty soon, like she's got a bad taste in her mouth. So it's not really rammed down our throat, so to speak. But obviously the pizza is poisoned with some sort of...
Because the guy who shoots Greta Gerwig, who we have not seen since he shot Greta Gerwig, is the guy who delivers the pizza.
Right.
Now, how he knew like that she would want pepperoni on it, I don't know. Maybe that's part of their Satanist powers. Or maybe
he waited for the order, then went and got a pizza at a pizza
that's
place.
What my kids said, but I'm like, no, because they're out in like the remote part. He was there shooting Greta Gerwig. What did he do? Go back to work and order a pizza and then bring it back out? I feel like can't be what happened.
Maybe he's got a collection of pizza toppings and
that was the only other option.
He's got a hot plate out in the van that they have out in the driveway, and he's just waiting for her to put her order in. Like, oh yeah, I do have pepperoni. That's great.
Now I do got to say a problem I had with the pizza scene, because she is kind of she hears a lot of shuffling, right? And noises, and she hasn't seen the mother yet, so she's kind of making her way up to the attic, and as that happens, the doorbell buzzes and she's freaked out, runs down, throws a 20 at the guy. The pizza's $8. She's like, keep the change. So he gets a nice 120% tip.
Yes.
And he like, it shows her in the house, and the way she's clutching the pizza, she's holding it vertically, like
right.
I'm like, what are you doing? And then when she opens the pizza, it's fine. I'm like, this pizza had better be so fucked up right now. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
That bothered me. I'm like, come on. No one, you can't hold a pizza like that, even if it's for effect. And if you do, you gotta fuck the pizza up.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like
no one sees someone holding a pizza like that and is like, sure.
Yeah, if you're freaked out and you want to clutch something like maybe a throw pillow or something like that, but yeah, nobody clutches a pizza in fear. I mean, that's just not done.
No.
But yeah, so there's a few little issues there, but there's some really, really fun and subtle creepiness going on where for example, when Samantha first meets Mrs. Ullman, who, even though Tom Noonan is nice and creepy as Mr. Ullman, Mrs. Ullman is far creepier, I think. And
because she's far friendlier.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Too friendly.
He at least has like some like nervous outbursts, or he seems agitated. She is just like smooth as butter and just the fucking spider waiting to sink its teeth into you.
Yeah, she is. And she, when she's first introduced, she kind of surprises Samantha because she comes up from the basement and says, she's got this fur coat on. She says, I keep my furs in the basement. And then it's as Samantha's sort of walking around before the shit really hits the fan, well before that, she just happens to see inside of a closet that there's all these fur coats. And she's like, wait a second. She said, the furs were in the basement.
Literally out loud, she says that.
Yeah, literally. And so there's some nice, like, little creepy elements, and it's where she finds the picture of the original family in front of the same car that she saw the Ullmans getting into. So you're starting to piece it together.
Yeah, see, that was something I didn't pick up on until I read this, like reread just a synopsis real quick, because I was just like, because Greta Gerwig does make, she points out the Volvo, and so she finds a picture of a family with the Volvo, and I don't, just in my head, because it's like a smaller boy, so in my head I was just like, oh, this is like a picture of them from a while ago, because their son now, because the guy is, I'm assuming, is their son. They do mention they had a child, but they're older now, a grown child, and then this mysterious dude who's obviously helping them. I don't think they ever call him their son, but it's very strongly implied. Yeah. So I was just like, oh, this is like an older picture of them. And so I was just like, I don't understand this connection. And then even there is, I'm so dumb, because there is a part where when she's kind of walking around the house trying to figure out where these sounds are coming from, she like speaks through a closed door, like, everything okay in there? Because I think she thinks the mom is in there, and she doesn't look in, but we do get a peek inside as the viewer, and it's two dead people and then a third dead person in a pentagram on the floor.
Yeah.
So that's your first, like, oh shit, okay, something's going on here. That's your first in the house thing. I just never put two and two together, because I was just like, who are those people? Where'd they come from?
Right.
Like, I knew that these people were not from here, you know. I just never was like, oh, right, they killed the original family.
Yes.
I'm just dumb.
But you're right, though. I mean, it is kind of convenient
that it's spelled out, which I will give them credit for. Like, she at least wasn't out loud like, are these the people who lived here before?
Right.
Because I would have hated that.
Murdered and laying on a pentagram.
I wonder where
somewhere.
They are.
But no, you're right. I mean, there are a few things that are just kind of a little too practical to maybe see as reasonable reality. That, like you said, the Ullmans are a creepy family, and they found the creepiest fucking house in the entire
right.
city. Like, there's something to that. But I think, though, that that's probably something that occurs to us more, at least to me, was a little bit more in retrospect than when you're watching it. I
totally.
think when you're watching it, it's all kind of it's all flowing pretty naturally. Now, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, but this is where I'm really sort of torn with this movie, because it's such a slow build.
Yeah.
But when the shit hits the fan, it's so sudden that it almost feels like maybe even too abrupt of a tonal shift in this movie, to where it starts to show, I don't want to go so far as to say it starts to show some of its modernness. Mm-hmm. But when it cuts to now, Samantha has, passed out from the,
it's like right at midnight, midnight's hitting, the eclipses in total, and the drugs of the pizza are hitting her. Right. And she's like on the attic stairs, and that door is starting to open, and then she like passes out. We're in like second gear still at this point. And then, yeah, you're right. We immediately jump to fifth gear.
Right. Exactly. And it's
she wakes up. Go ahead.
But she wakes up and I don't want to say that any of the camera work is too modern, but it it kind of jumps to almost like music video style directing. Like it is gone is all of the subtlety, gone is all of the build, and it just races real fast to catch up with itself in that scene. And now I will say, I'm glad that they didn't feel the need to go into a ton of backstory on who these people are. We get it. We get that they're Satanists. You're talking about putting some blood on somebody's belly and wearing some robes and stuff. That's really all we need as viewers to know that we're talking about something satanic.
Yeah.
But there is a ritual that is very much has nothing to do with any sort of natural course of, impregnating someone, but it obviously works. The magic works, and it's very magical because there's no like, blurred, like maybe there's some sex happening now or something.
No.
Like it's
just drinks some blood.
Just the ritual that does it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
because she's tied up. She's now in the basement on a pentagram, right? She's on a pentagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our family is home now. They come out of the shadows and our grandma shows up. Also looks like Eric Stoltz from The Mask.
Yes. It's a popular look.
Very popular look. And yeah, you're right. She just does a little ritual where she like paints a pentagram on her belly button, cuts her own wrist, does it for effect, not attention, down the vein. Good job, grandma. And makes her drink the blood, to which then she immediately busts out of her bonds. Like this, there are a lot of moments in this. This was the point where I was like, okay, I don't understand, because they didn't show me the events that led up to this and whether they're supposed to be secret or whatever. But just like, it seems like all they needed was someone to tie up and put in this, to do this ritual with. Use that time and opportunity to secure them a little better.
Right.
B, what else is going on in that night? Why is the eclipse important? Because the eclipse is over at this point that this is happening. Why did they have to leave the house? Why was no one else at the house? Why did they have to do this whole front about a babysitter and leave her alone for so long? Just have her show up and fucking knock her out and tie her up. Like,
well, that's a good point. I mean, that's a very good point. And if they had maybe just ushered in something like maybe the, Mr. and Mrs. Ullman had to go off and do some pre-ritual stuff or something like that. Like maybe that could give us a clue as to why they had to leave. But you're right. There's a lot of plot for convenience in this as opposed to reason. But you're right. And after she does get out of those restraints a little too easily, if there's one thing that I really don't like in horror films, and maybe it's because I grew up with all of the Michael Myers and the Jasons of the world, but I don't.
Can I predict what you're going to say?
Yes.
The use of a gun.
Well, the use of the use of a gun, but
so
also
put off by that.
But also like hapless murderers. Like, I don't like people tripping over themselves and a lot of Keystone Cops. Like, it's one thing that I don't like about the movie Scream. Like, even though I know that it's not like they're superhuman guys, right. But I mean that killers in Scream are some of the klutziest killers on the planet.
It's funny you say that, because the next movie we're going to do actually kind of deals with that. And that's why I kind of love the next movie we're going to do, but we're not going to get to that yet. That's funny you say that though.
But there is some klutziness in this. There is a little bit of, why don't you grab the gun thing? Like there's a couple moments, but I will say, I really do like this happening in this, shit hits the fan moment that we're discussing, is that while the movie is not too big on gore, with the exception of Greta Gerwig's face being blasted off, with the exception of that, there's some nice blood play here. Yeah. We get Samantha kind of slipping and falling all about this massive pool of blood. So now
because the son has brought Greta Gerwig's body inside the house for some reason. And
you're right.
How much blood did she have in her body? Because a lot had to come out of that hole in her face while she was in her car. And then there is still like 3 or 4 pints on the floor in the house.
Right. But it does make for a really great classic, like, young woman in a sort of like nightgown covered in blood, like that sort of Carrie imagery, that sort of, I don't know. There's just something iconic.
Yeah. Especially when it's not your blood,
Right. But so it's a nice visual there, but we're kind of circling around now to that question that I asked earlier, and I think it's safe to ask it now. Do you feel that this is climax matched its slow burn and build?
I don't, but I didn't care. Like, it was fine. I enjoyed the movie so much up to that point. I kind of knew what was going to come, like, it's not like what was happening I was surprised at, knowing it was Satanists, and I knew something like that would happen.
Right.
But yeah, it does happen very fast. I don't think it's as earned, but it's, I don't know. I'm going to be Rare Andy. I'm not going to judge it that harshly on that. That's fine.
And I'm glad.
Although I will, here's my last criticism, because, okay, so she pretty much gets away from everyone. It's just her and Tom Noonan. Everyone else is dead. And, already, like, she's kind of got these varicose veins coming out of her belly button, right? Like, you can tell something's going on with her. So Tom Noonan, she's like, I'm going to kill you. He's like, that's fine. You can shoot me. He's like, I'm only the messenger for the Lord's work, blah, blah, blah. And she does what any brave person would do in that situation, is she's like, I know I have to stop whatever's happening. And she shoots herself in the head. Now she like blows the side of her head out.
Yeah.
So now we've got our denouement, and she's now in a hospital. Her head is all wrapped up. She's survived her attempted suicide. Like, I don't know how, because there obviously no cops were out there. There were no who's calling an ambulance. So she's in the graveyard. So she's in a remote graveyard. She shot herself in the head. She still survives it. That part I don't even have an issue with. Then the nurse comes in and is like tending to her, and she's just like, oh, you poor thing. But don't worry, you're going to pull through. Both of you.
Yeah.
So the nurse knows that she's impregnated with the Antichrist. And at that point, I'm like, well, now wait. Now, is this some vast conspiracy with a lot of people involved? Or was this some like rinky dink operation with 3 people in it?
Well, do you think that that's an interesting take.
Who are from out of town? This nurse is from town.
I didn't know if the nurse knew that it was the devil's baby, though, or if she just thought a pregnant woman. Pregnant? Because to answer your question, which you're right, maybe it's a plot hole.
It seems implied, though, like it is very satanic implied. Both of you.
Yeah, and I don't know if she's just trying to put a little creepy.
She didn't sound that ominous when she said it, but it is.
Yeah, but obviously Tom Noonan's character, Mr. Ullman, would have had to drive her to like drop her off.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Steps of a hospital or something like that, because he's trying to get that baby born one way or another.
Yeah.
So that's the only conceivable way. Because you're right, there's no other way that they would have heard her or heard a gunshot or anything like that. He would have had to be the one to say, I've got to get that baby born. I'm going to drive her, leave her on the steps of a hospital or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but okay. You're right. It's
maybe that is a good enough explanation.
But for all of these criticisms, and we're only we're only criticizing just, to find fault with something, like, because we have to try and be fair and balanced here. Overall, I loved this movie.
Me too.
I really, really, really loved this movie. And while it might not be, a big ensemble cast of, 6 or 7 teenagers, and the fact that it is just centered around one character, kind of being the target for all the torment, it's not a big group slasher film, but it is successful in what it's trying to do, which is to really, take this poor innocent girl, put her in a situation where there is no help, there is no hope, and just kind of drag out that horror. And it does a great job of that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. You can't watch this movie and not feel the care that went into it, the love that went into it, the vision that went into it. Plot holes. I mean, yeah, we complained about some plot holes. They really are not that glaring or hard. They don't make it hard to enjoy the movie. I just like to complain about stuff. So,
well, no, that's what we're here to do. We're here to dig into both sides. But no, there's
just because I love your work, I'm not letting you off easy. All right,
right.
It could be better.
Well, here's one thing I want to leave our listening audience with is that because I would love to see somebody put this to the test. If you have a friend that maybe they just don't watch a lot of movies, maybe you're just pretty damn sure that they're not going to recognize Dee Wallace or Tom Noonan or Greta Gerwig or whatever. Try to show them this movie and tell them that it's made in 1983 and see if it works. I would love to see the results of that experiment if you can really pull it off, because like I said, I really think you could. It's done that well.
Yeah. Yeah, and even the end credits even are just a freeze frame of like the last shot and just the static, like where they list like 18 characters and the actors who played them. Just those huge, like nothing scrolling. It scrolls at the end, but like, and that's normal. But yeah, old 80s, it would just be like, to get all like the big credits out of the way would just be nice big freeze title cards. Oh, it's good. All right. Yeah, I recommend. Okay.
I do. Yes, absolutely recommend. 1,000%.
Well, that was 2009's 1983's The House of the Devil. Written, directed, and edited by Ty West. Tim, next week, you and we're going to talk about I think a classic from 1991, Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. I'm excited about this one because I hadn't watched it in a long time. Watched it a ton in high school, at least 10 times, maybe 15. So I'm excited about revisiting this one because it's been a while.
Yeah, basically it's a movie that shows that while there only might be 2 movies in this category, apparently any movie with a full GIMP suit in it, fantastic. If you have a full GIMP costume in your movie, it's going to be a absolute classic.
Yeah, it'll be one of my favorites for sure. Okay. Please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Our email is slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Oh, Tim, I am reminded this movie does pass the Bechdel-Wallace test.
Nice.
Yes, it does. There are 2 named female characters talking about renting a house.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good job. Good job, Ty West. So yeah, that's our email. Please email us with the comments, suggestions, problems. What do you think about lunar eclipses? Our Patreon is patreon.com/Slumber Podcast Massacre. A huge thanks to our patrons. You help make this possible. That about wraps it up for us. Tim, do you got anything else to say about The House of the Devil?
Well, just a quick question to our listeners. If anyone else out there knows of any other horror films that feature a harpsichord, please let me know, and we'll be sure to cover it.
Do not say the Addams Family. All right. All right, Tim, we'll see you later.
See ya.